is it not almost impossible actually in this day and age that there are that are true soul connection or true soul mates, because it needs a level of self-refinement in order to really attract the opposite. You hear this a lot nowadays. Actually, YouTube is full of it. I was also looking a lot. I was looking it up a lot, reading a lot about it, because I have always had this idea from a very young age about this fairy tale idea, actually about the perfect relationship and this soul connection, this soul union, this merging with another soul. And nowadays, a lot of people they say or think or feel that they have attracted their soulmate. And I to be honest, I'm kind of lost in this whole idea of relationships and soul connections and soul relationship, twin flames, and all those things, that I just put everything in a very beautiful bin and threw it out of my window. And I just focus on the main purpose of relationship, which is just simply self-refinement, and that's it. So you refine through others, and because I don't understand it, so I simplified it for myself in that way.
Well, I mean, what's the purpose of pondering upon the subject if it's not your reality, first of all? So what you didn't throw away soul connections. It wasn't your reality, so you threw away the ideas. You threw away thoughts about it. By having thoughts or dreaming about it doesn't mean that you actually have such an experience that can actually give you some kind of a true understanding about what that is. So once you are there, once you reach that level of self-refinement that you can attract someone on a higher vibration, and then also recognize the soul connection, as well as have the courage to pursue it and continue self-refinement process through the open communication with that soul partner, let's say, then you may say, yes, I have that experience, and then I am trying, because even though you may have soul connections, you also have distortions along with that soul connection. So the most important is to hold on to that recognition of a soul connection, but yet remember that one's limited self is still there, and it will keep on, expressing itself and try to our higher being will try to refine it through different kind of situations, even maybe some sort of temporary clashes. But the soul connection is something that cannot be broken. It's like true love, true love cannot be broken. It's a pure courage. It's like direct flow of self-expression that does not question, that does not have anything in between. So when the soul recognition is the same, you recognize that flow. So that's where soul connection is considered to be true love, because you recognize that flow. So anything in between that, or anything that arises within that flow as distortion, is then recognized, because you know the soul connection. Then you can recognize the impediment, and you can recognize, okay, these are my fears and insecurities that prevent me maybe from communicating openly or expressing myself, or my ego gets on the way, and so on and so forth. But soul connection is like a driving force. It's like that sort of something that you hold on to, and that allows you to continue that pursuing that connection, being in that connection. So because we're living in this day and age when you can't expect perfection from anyone. So by recognizing this unconditional aspect of your reality and mutually recognizing, you can hold on to it, and that can pull you through whatever difficulties and clashes and situations, because that pushes you to communicate. And communication is one of the highest forms of self-expression, where you choose to open up and say what's deeply stored within you. You choose to be vulnerable. You choose to be honest and sincere. And that's what supports the true soul connection, as well as courage. You can't be in a soul connection if you aren't courageous. Love is courage. So true love is unstoppable. When people say that I'm so insecure, I'm afraid of expressing myself, it means that they choose their fears, insecurities, and limited self to get better of them, or to impede their process of being an authentic self, meaning expressing themselves in an open and direct way. So it's also a sign maybe of maturity or some other issues, but it doesn't mean that we have to wait until we get perfect so that we can be in a beautiful soul connection. But being in a beautiful soul connection and experiencing true love doesn't mean that it's going to be continuous and uninterrupted. It's just that whenever we come out of that alignment because of our distortions, issues, fears, and some moments of feeling down, we need that love will remind us that I need to get myself back together, and again find my courage to pursue this connection or to resolve situations rather than giving up, because it's such a strong connection, you can't give up. Also, it's absolutely unstoppable. Like true love cannot be stopped by anything. It can be delayed, maybe impeded, or there can be some obstacles, but true love cannot be really truly stopped, because it's like natural being. You can't really stop it. You can somewhat conceal it, distort it, but it will still come out sooner or later. So it's a reflection of our true authentic self. It's a reflection of our true being. Love is just our true being. It's a deep contentment that you share with someone else. And through this sharing of this unified field or space of unconditional reality, you realize that you realize the essence of unity, the essence of yoga, the essence of spirituality, because that all is about the same thing. Spirituality is not separate from our human existence. So when people try to create some false ideas that they, in order to pursue spirituality, they have to remain single, they have to run away, escape, be alone. All of these are distortions, or the signs of fear, the signs of some kind of inner weakness. And then they say, no, my destiny is to be alone. No one's destiny is to be alone, but it's the destiny of the weakness. Once you choose strength over the weakness, your destiny becomes the destiny of your strength. And so you can only come to the realization of your true purpose and true destiny once you hold on to the essential root or foundation of your being, which is the ultimate reality, which is that unconditional. And that pulls you through whatever difficulties and distortions that also alongside keep manifesting and keep somewhat trying to distort, impede your life, or kind of create obstacles on your path, right? But obstacles do not define your path. Your courage defines your path. Your sincerity defines your path. Your openness defines your path. Your desire to be with those people who encourage you and empower you, that's the kind of the strength of your being that pulls you through. And so true soul connections are those which encourage us, which empower us, but also that can challenge us sometimes. But these challenges are nothing in comparison with that strength that they give us, that empowerment that they give us, that support that they give us on a deeper level. So through the soul connection, we feel truly fulfilled.
Why is?
Wait a second.
Yeah, sorry.
For example, sexual connections or some kind of logical, calculative connections are not sustainable. They can't be sustained throughout life because they will be challenged, because there's no root in those connections. There is lust, satisfaction, maybe temporary attraction. So these kind of connections, that's why fall apart, and they're not soul connections, because they're based on some kind of temporary tendencies, which we may call karmic tendencies. That's why many people call them karmic connections, because they aren't based on they're not rooted in the ultimate. They are not coming from the heart. Usually people who glide along the surface in this kind of connections are not rooted within. They aren't ready to open their heart, so to speak, or they are not approaching life through heart. They approach life very logically and through their temporary impulses. So, but once you experience something deeper, you can no longer glide along the surface. You cannot pursue any more superficiality. And that's where the true soul search begins. It begins from within. It pushes you also not only to look for companions, but or deeper connections, but it first of all turns you within so that you start realizing your depth and seeing your distortions and issues that don't allow you maybe to connect deeply with people, or didn't allow you to connect deeply before. And now you're looking for this deeper connection within yourself, and thus you start opening to deeper connections outside of self. And so you start seeing through the falsehood, because you've seen through the falsehood within yourself. So now you realize the depth of yourself, and through that depth you initiate connections and contacts with other people then. And so most probably a lot of superficial connections will fall off, and only those connections which are more kind of fulfilling will remain. But with time and more refinement, the depth and the level of understanding, I mean, you will feel more profound connection within yourself and within the ultimate. So you will see everything through that, and your natural selection of partnerships will also refine profoundly. And so you might sometimes feel that it's very difficult to find someone truly, because that person has to feel that frequency and be willing to pursue that frequency within themselves and with you, so that the connection is sustainable. So then it becomes a soul choice as well for both people, if they recognize, appreciate this, and are ready to pursue it further. And so people usually say that love is very simple. It is simple, but our distortions, our fears are very complex. I mean, they complicate our lives. So love is very simple. It's content, it's beautiful. It's a pure emanation. It doesn't need any masks. It doesn't need anything to cover it up. It's absolutely vulnerable but powerful at the same time. It's an open flow. It's a courageous flow, right? But when you say that, yeah, I somewhat am afraid, or I'm somewhat choosing fear over love, it means you haven't really opened up to that degree that you just surrender to the open flow and allow it to manifest, you know. So that's the thing.
Why do you what is the reason why we need courage then? Because like when you recognize something in that person which is true love, that you think, okay, this is it, I found it, or I attracted it, or whatever, but then you don't really need courage then decisions becomes always very easy, I think, because you already know.
Exactly, but courage is just a natural emanation. Love is courage. You don't need courage as something separate. Love is courage, because you're ready to, you know, turn the mountains when you're in love. And I'm not saying just foolish kind of lustful expression, because also sexual desperation and obsession and sexual desire can also be unstoppable and temporarily courageous as well, because one is pushed to act, but that's not sustainable, because it does not come from the ultimate. It comes from the transitor. Once the desire is satisfied somewhat, the whole point kind of becomes irrelevant. The whole pursuit becomes irrelevant. But true love is something much deeper, you know, and naturally one cannot realize the essence of love as long as one kind of allows fear to be there as well. So once fear is neutralized or dissolved, one becomes naturally courageous, one becomes naturally sincere, one becomes naturally open, one becomes naturally, you know, expressive, one becomes naturally ready to be just vulnerable and trust. So that's why, in other words, love is also trust. Because when you trust, you're what? You're courageous. You don't care whether you're vulnerable, you're sharing something that, you know, can be used against you, because you don't have such thoughts. Because fears come from trauma. Fear is a traumatic response. Love and trust is the only way to heal. It's like throwing yourself, being afraid, but throwing yourself there anyways. That's the way to heal, because this is the way to, you know, embrace something new. It's like a leap of faith. But the majority of people brought up in this, or throughout social, or through social constraints, or through somewhat, you know, all these different like distorted paradigms that dominate our society, or maybe religious backgrounds, so that it doesn't allow them to really be themselves and allow them to be vulnerable, because there is fear. Fear means somewhere their trust was broken, maybe by their parents, by their early childhood circumstances or teenage circumstances. So now they're driven by trauma rather than driven by inner trust to life. Somewhere there is a feeling that life is against me. That's where there is lack of trust, because there is an expectation that someone is going to hurt me, someone is going to take advantage of me. So it's a traumatic response. As long as the person chooses to act upon one's traumatic response, one cannot choose love. One chooses fear, distrust, and thus one becomes opposite to courageous, opposite to loving, more calculative and logically kind of assuming. But that is not, that's why one kind of deprives oneself from the true reality, from true expansion, from true evolution. Because evolution does not happen through fear. It happens through courage and leap of faith and surrender as well. So spirituality, love, they go hand, it's one and the same thing. You surrender in life. You surrender to everything, and life represents what? Life represents relationships, life represents challenges, life represents different kind of career situations. But even when you look deeper at career, money and all, it's just a result of networking and communication. So after all, it's all about relationship. Our life is all about relationship. We can try to negate it and to disagree, but life is all about relationships. It's your ability, after all, to communicate. If you're a good communicator, it translates into your wealth, into your abundance. Again, what is wealth and abundance? It's your intelligence. It's the depth of your awareness that makes you wealthy or a poor person. So if you choose to glide along the surface, it means that your awareness is very superficial. It's not deep enough to make you understand how creation works and how you may, express yourself creatively so that you can experience your abundance. Abundance is your emanation. Love is your emanation. If you are that, you start perceiving life in alignment. You never lack anything. And again, you can experience true love when you don't come from the standpoint of lacking anything. Because when you're a desperate being, you're in need of something, you emanate that desperation and need. But love is abundance. That's why it's attractive, because we get attracted to people who emanate that abundance, who emanate that freedom, who emanates open self-expression. That's why most of the people fall in love or are being approached or pursued by someone when they're in this kind of a foolish mode, playful mode, very authentic, very, kind of easy mode, because it's they emanate that natural attraction, because they are not preoccupied with anything at that moment, and they seem to be the most attractive. But it's not sustainable for the majority of people. To attract is one thing, but to sustain a relationship is a different thing. Because to sustain a relationship, you need to be ready and open to, again, what? Communicate, ready to resolve, ready to step over your childhood traumas, traumatic responses. And even if you express yourself through a traumatic response, being ready to kind of admit it, recognize it, and resolve again things through communication with your partner. Otherwise, there is no progress. Through true connection, we can evolve, we can refine ourselves deeper, but there has to be enough maturity and readiness to pursue that sort of path, because it may be challenging at first. But the deeper we go, the easier it becomes, because the simpler we are, the simpler the communication is, the more spontaneous and natural the connection becomes. So the connection is perceived as difficult when we refuse to dive in deeper within ourselves and let go of our old patterns, traumatic responses, certain issues that we dearly hold on to. And that's why even the most beautiful soul connection may seem to be difficult at first, or even we may sabotage it, and it may seem to be not working for a while. But sooner or later, if it's a true connection, nothing again can break it or stop it. So it may take even sometimes some time for separation or some kind of realization, but sooner or later, souls keep on drifting towards each other. True soul connections, true soul contracts cannot be easily, just destroyed or abandoned, because sooner or later, our soul will keep on calling us, or will start calling us again towards that. And it's not towards the connection per se. The connection is just the external reflection. It's towards our authenticity, because our true soul connections remind us of our authenticity, nothing more, of true love within. So again, it's about self-love. True soul connections allow us to love ourselves truly, deeply. And love to ourselves is not something that you have to do or think about. It's just being there, content within oneself, being focused within and coming from that root outwardly or outwards. And so during moments of separation, people have an opportunity to realize that soul connection and to understand that they were veiled, or their unrefined being, their ego came on the way or got on the way, so they couldn't maybe pursue it further and needed that moment of separation to realize. So it often happens at the beginning, but when people are in separation, say, they're still connected, because soul cannot be separated. There's still connection. It's just that physically they are apart, which allows them again to look more within and realize their distortions. Once they realize their distortions, they realize that it has nothing to do with the connection itself, and the connection is beautiful and it's worth pursuing, but it was them. So this realization helps them to transform their life and to approach the relationship again, or the connection again, through that transformed self. And so when we learn the mistakes, when we learn the pain of self-sabotage, then we understand the value of true connections. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a love connection only. It can be friendship. It can be even a connection between just some siblings or relatives. Some siblings or relatives could also be our soulmates. Some friends could be soulmates. But when they go through a certain process of maybe self-refinement, or maybe they go through tough situations in life, they may be veiled for a while. Everyone has their own cycles, their own situations. So again, soul connections allow us to be patient, to learn patience, perseverance, understanding of other beings, and kind of allowing them to go through whatever they have to go to. But again, true soul connection cannot be, cannot stay apart for too long, because the longing is too strong. And also, if it's true love, then communication cannot be stopped for too long. It will be too painful, and souls will be looking for the restoration or reconciliation, restoration of the communication, reconciliation. So often I also see that people project their ideal on some connections which are maybe not actual soul connections. So that's why it's very difficult to really say what true soul connection is, because one either has that experience or doesn't. It's like there's so many YouTube videos about meditation, so many books written about what meditation and yoga are, but in reality, very few know directly through experience what that is. And if you look at yoga, it's again, it's a unification of souls. It's the connection with our ultimate, with a higher being. What is higher being? Is a collective being, is a higher frequency of existence. And so again, it's the process of evolution is what is the process of unification of souls. So to understand this subject in depth, we have to be on that level of spiritual maturity and awareness to kind of dig into it. Otherwise, we're just gliding along the surface, speculating, imagining, reading certain texts without really having any direct experience. The same applies to our love affairs and relationships and connections. We are longing for something like that, but yet we're not capable of. So we start projecting twin flames and soul connections onto people who have nothing to do with that. Neither we have that ability or capacity yet within ourselves to experience that, because we're not refined. We're driven by trauma. We're driven by distortions. So even though our soul longs for it, because we cannot deny it, it's embedded in every being, because it, yearns for unification. But yet the capacity, the capability to unify is in question there. So even though sometimes they meet someone, they really feel deeply connected, their fears get better of them, they sabotage connections, their traumas just veil them, so they just cannot pursue it further. And then they regret, and then they dive deeper, they go along this sort of a victimized cycle until they realize that they just couldn't handle it. And so they need to look within and learn to understand themselves deeper. Or if they get, or not to rush into relationships, or if they get into relationships, not to project some ideal, but to just allow themselves to learn through these relationships, even if they're not the best of soul connections, but somewhat, if you got attracted to someone, it means you were driven by your trauma on the subconscious level, and somewhat this person will become your trigger. So sooner or later, the romantic phase will fade away and the truth will hit. So you will start facing each other. And again, karmic connection, even though people can say that it's a karmic connection, after all, it also could be a soul connection if both people choose to refine themselves through this connection, choose to refine their, distortions and karmic baggage, and kind of just simply choose to be with each other. So it's also one of the scenarios. So many people just make a life choice to be with someone, even though it's maybe not the best of the matches, but somewhat the relationship is sustainable because it's a decision, it's a choice. So when they choose to pursue these connections, maybe they feel dissatisfied on some levels, but they numb that dissatisfaction and just excuse themselves and say, okay, at least everything is fine. I'm not in conflict constantly. Maybe they are not in this lifetime interested in soul connections. So if their material needs are satisfied, if their sexual needs are satisfied, then they consider that relationship as a satisfactory one, and that's fine. Not everyone is here to, to realize the value and put that value into soul connections. But once the soul is mature and let's say spiritually mature, it doesn't matter what your age is, but you kind of feel that no matter what you have, how much wealth you have, what you possess, without true connection, life is kind of miserable. Not miserable, I mean, you can enjoy also your own being, you can be content, but soul connections fulfill our life. They help us to evolve further in a deeper sense, and they help us to discover deeper kind of meaning of the external existence, bodily existence. So then if you put the highest priority or the highest value to this sort of connections, your life will be driven by that, and so you will be also more driven by your spiritual and kind of higher needs, soul needs, rather than just mundane needs or some kind of lower urges. So